Yeah.
So far this year, these others have already taken almost 105,000 contracts in gold off of COMEX and delivered. You're talking 325 tons of gold, over 10 million ounces of gold has been delivered this year alone by these sovereign wealth funds, these family offices. In the past month alone, we've seen 100 million ounces taken out of SLV. 60 mil, excuse me, this is the past 4 months, 60 million over the past month, 20 million over the last week. The SLV is being drained by the participants, the qualified participants who are able to do that. And central banks alone have added 60 tons of gold to the reserves last month. You can see that the price of metal is a tool of misdirection, that the biggest money in the world is using this price, this suppressed price, to drain the centers of physical metals. Gold is leaving the COMEX at the fastest monthly pace ever in the history of the COMEX market. And, I think that you have to take a step back and realize that in a strong and healthy environment where there isn't problems on the, or there aren't problems on the horizon, that you don't see things like this. You don't see massive drawdowns of metal quietly. And so, yeah, I just think that the stage is being set for something big.
Today, we're diving into one of the most significant but often overlooked economic trends: the massive accumulation of gold by central banks worldwide. Why are they doing this, and what does it mean for the global economy? Stay tuned as we explore the implications of these strategic moves and what they might signal for the future.
I would argue it's intended. You have to be an idiot to not see what kicking Russia out of SWIFT and sanctioning and stealing their assets would do from a big picture. And
Yeah.
I just think that the infrastructure that the world has set up is enough to me, solidify that this is already in motion. Just route open up. It's called the North-South Corridor, and it's safe passage from Iran to India through past Russia, and everyone else has to go around the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, you're talking about massive infrastructure being set up, relationships being set up, digital currencies being set up, energy agreements being set up. All of these things being set up, and the U.S. is not part of it. So when that switch is flipped, what happens to the value of the dollar? What happens to interest rates in response? These are all things that I think are baked into the cake. And so this is why I believe so many people are ill prepared for what's coming, because no one's even heard of the majority of these things. No one even knows that Russia and Saudi Arabia struck a joint military cooperation agreement. No, most people don't know about the Belt Road Initiative, or that gold is tier one, or that the central banks are accumulating it, or that the biggest money in the world is pulling metal off of COMEX, the LME, and 100 million ounces backdoored by the commercial banks off of SLV last month. All of these things put together say one thing: de-dollarization, moving away from the dollar. And they're using the manipulated prices of the world's commodities as controlled by COMEX and the LME to run cover for it. And at some point, and we're getting close to it, when you see Russia say it's time to break free of the COMEX and the LME and their fraudulent system, we're getting real close to that point where they go bang. Now the price goes to the moon in all of these assets. Do you think there's any wonder that JP Morgan, while paying a $920 million fine to the Justice Department for manipulating the market, has accumulated the largest physical position of metal the world has ever seen? Do you think there's any coincidence? In fact, they've accumulated over 1.1 billion ounces of silver and over 35 million ounces of gold while paying this fine, and they're still allowed to be the administrator of the world's largest silver trust, SLV. Talk about a fox guarding the hen house. The biggest money in the world already knows what's coming. They're cued into it or clued into it. And I think that I think the probability of something along these lines happening is greater than it's ever been.
The potential decline of the US dollar is a major factor driving the gold accumulation trend. For decades, the dollar has been the cornerstone of global trade and finance, but as we've just seen, there are growing concerns about its future. Central banks are aware that a weakening dollar could lead to significant economic instability, which is why they're turning to gold as a hedge. Gold offers a tangible, universally accepted form of value that isn't tied to any single nation's economic performance, making it an attractive alternative as confidence in the dollar wanes.
I could be wrong. Look, I mean, you said a bunch of things about, people don't think this is possible. And I think that's a totally reasonable and rational understanding, right? It's reasonable to expect tomorrow to be like yesterday. That's why we get surprised by bubbles in the stock market, not necessarily just because of greed, but because reasonable people who see a 10-year track record might assume we'd see an 11-year track record. That's a reasonable thought. And to assume that we're going to see such a dramatic great reset of our way of life and living and transacting is very hard to wrap your mind around. It reminds me of a Luke Gromen quote. And I love Luke because he's not really a gold bug, but he'll say there's very few points in history where you want to own gold. But at those moments, it's about all you want to own. And, I'm kind of like, I'm a bit of a gold bug at heart. And I like to just slowly accumulate, hope I never need it, intend on leaving to my kids. But, in that scenario, and to your point, like it gives me the confidence to sleep at night. That's what it does.
Gold's role as the ultimate safe haven cannot be overstated, especially in today's uncertain economic climate. Central banks are not just investing in gold for its monetary value, but for the stability and security it provides. Throughout history, gold has consistently held its value, even when other assets have faltered. This is why, in times of crisis, both individuals and institutions flock to gold. For central banks, gold is a way to safeguard national wealth and ensure financial stability in the face of global uncertainty.
All of those dollars collapsing come home. This is pillar number one of hyperinflation. Those dollars come collapsing home, driving the dollar down, collapsing the dollar and creating hyperinflation. What happens to interest rates in that moment? They go to the moon. When you have hyperinflation, you have to have massively higher interest rates to compensate for the loss of purchasing power. Stocks, bonds, and real estate are inversely correlated to what? A massive rise in interest rates that the Federal Reserve doesn't want to mess with. So how do you have a great reset? Saudi Arabia comes out and says, we're done taking just dollars and we're opening it up to all these other currencies because the infrastructure is in place, the relationships are in place, the coalescence, the coalitions of 90% of human population is together, and they are going to issue a new currency. And I would argue, why did they go gold, tier one asset in gold? Why did they classify gold as tier one? Who's the biggest accumulators and producers and importers of it in the world? Oh yeah, the BRICS nations are. They are. And it's now tier one. And hey, we got a beta test of a new digital currency that works in distributed ledger technology for the whole world to see the immutability of all of the gold and commodities that these BRICS nations are going to pledge to a new currency. And when that happens, bang, the dollar collapses, interest rates spike, stocks, bonds, and real estate vaporize in a matter of minutes. There is your great reset, where everything has been blown up to ridiculously high levels. And when rates spike, everything collapses, and the Fed can stand back and say, those sons of bitches, those BRICS nations blew everything up. We never did this. We were trying to get tough on inflation. But what did they do? They created hyperinflation. They ruined everything for us. And everyone in the United States who feels wealthy in their 401k and in their home and their bond portfolio overnight is leveled down to a common denominator. And that's exactly how fragile this entire ecosystem truly is.
The specter of hyperinflation and the potential collapse of the dollar are scenarios that central banks cannot afford to ignore. As we've just explored, these possibilities could trigger a great reset in the global financial system. In such a scenario, gold would likely emerge as a key asset, providing a stable foundation upon which to rebuild. By stockpiling gold, central banks are essentially insuring themselves against these extreme outcomes, ensuring they have a secure asset that can be relied upon even in the most dire economic conditions. Central banks are making strategic moves to secure their futures, and gold is at the heart of these plans. As we navigate uncertain economic waters, understanding these trends is more important than ever. Like and share this video, subscribe to our channel for more videos. Stay informed and stay prepared.